You see, the problems that we face in the Western world today in terms of Islamic terrorism or extremism, we need to understand where it started. I'm talking about 1979, when an Air France plane brings in a gentleman all the way from France and they land in Tehran. I'm talking about Ayatollah Khomeini.
Why I left Iran, I have to go back to say why. What happened to me that I had to leave Iran?
He came here as the so-called savior of the Iranian people, and he stole a revolution.
At age 16, when it was the kind of early revolution, Islamic revolution, I was arrested by the Islamic Republic of Iran's military forces.
And instead of the Iranian people finding liberty, freedom, and personal expression of their views without fear of death, we ended up with tens of thousands of Iranians being killed, many murdered in the subsequent war with Iraq. And instead of finding freedom or democracy or liberty, we found that Iran, a great civilization, ended up under the worst possible oppressive dictators that have ever lived on this globe, which hang and kill people at will.
And I was imprisoned for 18 months, and I went to Evin prison. If I want to just go back to say why I was arrested, why the Islamic Republic of Iran would arrest a 16-year-old child, I have to say that because all my rights as a woman, as a young girl, was taken away from me after the establishment of the Islamic Republic in Iran under the Khomeiniist regime. So when I came out of the prison, I was not allowed to obtain my further education. So that was the main reason that my parents decided to move out of Iran in 1984, end of 1984-85.
Human rights issue in Iran has been very serious, and actually that is the reason why there are about 300,000 Iranians are living in Canada. That is the reason why 5-6 million people, Iranians, from all walks of life, they have left their country.
The only reason that I really felt like Canada is a very good place was because of equality, inclusiveness, and the so-called multiculturalism, which is like really openness for all the nations. And there was no systematic racism in Canada as it was in the rest of the Europe. And I was very happy, and I felt very comfortable and safe after coming to Canada. Due to some work situation, I had to be transferred to British Columbia. And I lived there for over 8 years, and then before coming to Ottawa in 2002. But in British Columbia, I never experienced the presence of the Islamic Republic and their activities, either in Vancouver or in other cities, surrounding cities. But as soon as I arrived in Ottawa, because of the presence of the Islamic Republic's embassy, I noticed that how active they are.
In 1980, the Iranian assassin Daoud Saladin had an escape route that lay through Canada. Canada was used as a bridge for the Iranian government.
There was the former press attaché of former government of Iran during the Pahlavi dynasty was living in United States, and his name was Ali Akbar Tabatabai. The Islamic Republic of Iran trained and recruited an African American to go and just assassinate him. And that was during the chain assassination, which was inside of Iran and also in Europe. This happened in America, in the United States. And this man dressed up as a postal worker.
I told him, special delivery package for Mr. Tabatabai. He has to sign for it. And I heard his voice in the background, and he did come out to sign. And then for the first time in my life, and for the first and last time in his life, we saw each other.
Where were you holding the gun, and where were you holding the package?
The package was facing him. The second package was beneath that package. I have them in my hand.
With one hand?
With one hand. In this bottom package, there's a pistol, and it's held flat. And 3 times point blank range.
You squeezed 3 shots.
3 shots.
Did you see them hit the target?
I saw his clothes jump and the dust jump out of his clothes.
And any word said?
No, nothing was said. Just our eyes locked. And he gave me the very strong impression of a man who was expecting to die.
As soon as I arrived in Ottawa, because of the presence of the Islamic Republic's embassy, I noticed that how active they are in universities, in having cultural events, bringing some movie stars, also having their own artists and musicians to Canada. Art performances, and also a lot of cultural activities inside of the cities of Canadian cities, like city of Ottawa, in the libraries, talking about Iranians' arts, and to draw the attention of the public and showing it that they are not warmongers, they are not terrorists. All the Iranian embassies emphasizing is true culture and art. Iranian embassy in Ottawa was very active throughout the country. They started their activities through having a lot of religious events.
Religious ceremonies like Ashura, religious ceremonies like
Arba'in, Ashura, Tasu'a.
the birth of a prophet or the death of the prophet and things like that, to try to persuade people of conviction, religious conviction from other countries, and try to gather them and organize them against the Iranian dissidents and ordinary Iranian citizens.
چرا ما الان اینجاییم و چرا داریم تظاهرات میکنیم؟ احتمالاً از طریق اطلاعیه هایی که دیشب پخش شد تقریبا همه تو جریان هستن. عناصر و ماموران جمهوری اسلامی ایران اعزام شدن در شهر تورنتو زیر پوشش مراسم عاشورا.
You see, there's another aspect of Iranian embassy and Iranian intelligence that works out of the Iranian embassy even when they don't have an embassy here. They work out of a certain number of mosques that are operated not by Iranians but by South Asian, which I mean Indian, Pakistani Shias and Arab Shia communities. So over there, you have celebrations of Ayatollah Khomeini.
Chain assassination started shortly after the revolution. So all the dissidents and the opposition leaders, they were murdered. Mr. Bakhtiyar, Oveisi, also the Mykonos killing.
Aside from other political figures and leaders who have been assassinated in Europe, we've seen two major assassinations of Kurdish political leaders, one in Vienna in 1989 and one in Berlin, famously known for Mykonos trial in 1992 against Dr. Abdurrahman Qassemlu and Dr. Sharif Kandi, who were assassinated by the Iranian emissaries along with their aides at that time. So we know for a fact from the court findings and the investigations that were done, much of the planning were done through the embassies.
تجربه خود من از جریان نمایندگی جمهوری اسلامی در آلمان به ویژه در رابطه با تروری که در برلین انجام گرفت، در اونجا در دادگاه روشن شد که اینها در فعالیت‌های تروریستی شرکت دارند و به ویژه در رابطه با جریان ترور در برلین معلوم شد که سفیر ایران در بن تو این جریان دخالت داشته و بعد از تروری رو که انجام گرفت اسم رمزی رو که از سفارت به تهران زده بودند به نام فریاد بزرگ علوی، منظور فریاد آیت الله علی خامنه‌ای هست، این رو دستگاه‌های اطلاعاتی آلمان ضبط کرده بودند و این خودش سندی بود که سفارت در رابطه با این جریان دخیل است.
There was a killing of multiple individuals who were in dissent from the policies of the Iranian government. This was the equivalent of a contract killing. There was Iranian representation in Europe, extensive in Europe. And we've seen so many other things like this.
The most common question is, why is the Islamic Republic of Iran supporting terrorism internationally, globally? The reason behind it is simple, because the Western government has supported the Islamic Republic of Iran to come to power right from the beginning of their establishment. Fear of Russian, they have supported the Islamic Republic of Iran, and now they have withdrawn their support from Islamic Republic of Iran, and that made the Islamic Republic of Iran to do whatever is possible to gain their validation, to gain their power, to become the lead country in the Middle East. For that reason, simply they do anything if it's possible to commit a crime, mass crime in the West. They are willing to do so in order to regain this support from Western country.
رضا مظلومات،
علی اکبر قربانی،
زهرا رجبی،
فریدون فرخزاد،
محمد نقدی،
شاهپور بختیار،
محمد صادق شرفکندی،
سیروس الهی،
فریدون فرخزاد،
علی توکلی،
علی اکبر قربانی،
حمید رضا چیتگر،
شاپور بختیار،
غلام علی اویسی،
عبدالرحمن برومند،
علی اکبر طباطبایی،
سیروس الهی،
شهریار شفیع،
کاظم رجبی،
احمد توکلی،
عبدالرحمن قاسمی،
محمد صادق شرفکندی،
فریدون
فرخزاد، زهرا رجبی،
علی اکبر قربانی،
بیژن
شاهپور بختیار،
بیژن فاضلی،
عبدالرحمن برومند،
غلام کشاورز،
سیروس الهی.
After many years, 1993, Iran heavily recruited and trained one of its own, Mr. Mansour Ahani.
He arrived in Canada, made a refugee claim, which was not unusual. But at that time, we were really wide open.
And fortunately, the intelligence department of the Canadian government at that time, they were informed about Mr. Mansour Ahani, that he was planning to murder.
We have been asked this question, and I personally have been asked these questions, that do you think the diplomats will engage in terrorist acts? This is actually an issue that has been proved in Canada. When we saw the case of Mansour Ahani,
he was an Iranian government agent that was sent here to do some killing.
He was actually affiliated with the Iranian Security Agency and the Ministry of Intelligence. Now, he was infiltrated. When I say he was infiltrated, he was put in Canada by the Iranian Ministry of Intelligence, but basically portraying as being a genuine political refugee. And eventually he was deported back to Iran.
It is a horrible tally of broken bones, bruises, and other traumas. A litany of injuries suffered by Zahra Kazemi, a Canadian journalist who died in Iran. The details come from an Iranian doctor who says he examined Kazemi in hospital and who says he believes his patient was tortured.
Well, the case of Zahra Kazemi, the Iranian-Canadian photojournalist who was taken prisoner by the Iranian regime on what appear to be trumped-up charges and wound up dying in custody, reportedly raped, in fact, brutalized in any event, is in many ways illustrative of the fallacy that surrounds so many claims that we need to have the Iranian embassy in Canada opened. There was an Iranian embassy in operation.
With me for all my life during the past 10 to 15 years, over and over, I'm thinking about that night when I was emergency room physician and they brought in someone from Evin prison, a lady, 54-year-old, beaten to death, raped, and every time I think I owe her. I owe her to be her voice. I think all of us, we owe her. And we owe all the people, voiceless people, who captured in the Iranian regimes as a hostage.
مرا ببو برای آخرین بار تو را خدا نگهدار که می روم به سوی سرنوشت بهار ما گذشته گذشته ها گذشته منم به جستجوی سرنوشت
At the end, I just want to mention, even personally, I don't feel safe if they come back here as a full opening their embassy because of their history of violence against Iranian people around the world and history of more than 300 assassinations they done during past years. And because I think I challenged them. I challenged them personally as focusing the Mrs. Kazemi's case. I was eyewitness from inside. I came up and I gave my testimony to the world. And they are angry with me and they can do anything.
In 2012, on September 7, 2012, Canada and Iran's relationship was severed and the embassy was shut down.
Our government, the Harper government, closed the embassy in Tehran in 2012 for a number of reasons. First and foremost, at that time, it was to protect our Foreign Service staff at the embassy.
Ever since the attack on the British embassy last year, I have been increasingly concerned about the safety of our diplomats. This is a regime that, among its many wrongs, does not respect normal practices of diplomatic immunity and protection. And given that regime on so many angles, whether it's its nuclear program, its support for Assad, its anti-Semitism, its support for terrorism, it just becomes worse and worse and worse.
As well as violation of the rights of diplomats in Iran. I mean, they see that, they took the American diplomats hostage, they put fire in the Saudi Arabian's embassy, they attacked British embassy, and those nasty things that happened in Tehran.
What began as a protest outside Britain's diplomatic headquarters in Iran became an assault on what demonstrators called a den of spies. Some officers appeared to just look on as protesters smashed the symbols of Britain's presence in Iran.
there is no guarantee on any given day, particularly when it involves countries like Canada, which are very open and frank in their fair criticisms of the Iranian regime, that Iran, in fact, will protect the Canadian Foreign Embassy staff and ambassador.
But also Iran is very aggressively engaged in espionage, influence operations, and trying to intimidate its critics and exiles and refugees here in Canada.
The Iranian regime diplomats are known to be infiltrators of the Iranian regime in the Iranian communities in Canada and elsewhere, and that was one of the main reasons why the Iranian embassy was closed in the very first place.
The message, whether stated explicitly or otherwise, to those Iranian Canadians is, look, we have the backing of a nation state, of intelligence services, of the military, and of outright terrorist organizations, some of which have a presence on your soil here, and we're prepared to use all of that against you.
In recent years, before the closure was announced, we found that the Iranian embassy in Ottawa was engaged in criminal activity, attempting to obtain material to support its nuclear adventurism.
The other concern, of course, is that the Iranian embassy, their intelligence activities also include things like economic intelligence gathering and information theft. The Iranian government has again had a long history of trying to appropriate or steal technology or acquire sensitive technology through underhanded means.
When it comes to Iran, we have to keep in mind that Islamic Republic of Iran has been violating human rights for its own citizens for the past 38 years they have been in office.
The Iranian government, ever since its founding after the revolution in 1979, has at every opportunity violated the rights of dissidents. It's imprisoned people, it's tortured people, it has murdered people, it has subjugated women, treated them as second-class citizens. It has treated religious and ethnic minorities terribly.
So our government has to keep this in mind, and I believe that they are keeping this very issue of human rights in their mind.
You know, the Iranian government has carried out massacres, horrendous, unspeakable massacres.
Last year alone, an estimated 1,000 Iranian citizens were executed.
And they've exported their terror abroad. There have been assassinations of dissidents abroad. There have been attacks in every corner of the globe.
Iran has been recognized by Canada and countries around the democratic world as a chronic sponsor of state terrorism.
We have seen in the last close to 40 years a lot of influential figures, political leaders, activists, human rights activists, writers have been targeted both inside and outside of Iran.
As well, Iran has been engaged for decades in its nuclear adventurism, its attempt to acquire nuclear weapons, which it has repeatedly, specifically said would be used to eliminate the state of Israel.
It's also important that we not think of these violations as things that have happened in the past and that the problem is now over. The very people who are responsible for these massacres, the very people who are responsible for these violations of human rights, those people are now in charge, even though some of them pretend to be reformists in nature.
And Canada says it is ready to resume diplomatic ties with Iran. After a 4-year hiatus, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said he would discuss the resumption of Ottawa-Tehran ties at a cabinet meeting in the coming weeks. Canada's foreign ministry also said that Ottawa will decide whether to allow the country's companies to join U.S. and EU firms rushing to do business with Iran.
Under this government, there have been attempts to reestablish diplomatic relations with Iran. And we hear about reasons like, how could it help if we cut off all communications? We need to be in diplomatic relations with every nation. But this is not a nation that you want to be in diplomatic relations with. You need to have knowledge what's going on in that country, but to be dealing with that country and to be actually exploring areas of trade. What we're doing in Canada now is that we're opening the door for the expansionist regime to have more input.
It is almost like saying we need Hitler to come here so that we can have an embassy of Nazi Germany so that we can bring peace. These people are there as bloodthirsty medieval monsters who would want to destroy Western civilization. Why do we need an Iranian embassy to come here to make their job easy?
We need to pay attention to the politicians in this country who have no conscience. Basically, they're getting paid. They're getting paid big dollars by the Iranian regime to expand into the country of Canada.
How would you feel to have the representatives of the state sponsor of terrorism, representatives who are members of IRGC and Quds forces, to come to Canada and to freely walk in our streets?
And we need to hold our politicians accountable. We cannot let them go ahead through the Trudeau government and lobby any kind of negotiations with Iran under an umbrella of business, because it's being marketed very cleverly as a business opportunity for Canada. But really speaking, it is an opportunity for Iran to infiltrate this country according to the aspirations of that regime.
And we don't want, people coming from Iranian officials coming to Ottawa under the protection of diplomatic immunity as a diplomat and then acting as a spy for Iranian Canadians who are living here, who have basically escaped the regime.
On the other hand, the opening of potential reopening of the Iranian embassy in Ottawa would reopen again, would give Iran again the Revolutionary Guard and its criminal tentacles the opportunity to use a North American base to pursue further criminal activity.
There has been concerns voiced from the dissidents that they don't feel safe. Why is it, and how could it be that there are any individuals living in our free land that is not feeling safe? This is a travesty, and it is criminal to think that these are the kinds of conditions that Iranian dissidents have to be living in our very country. To be watching your back in Canada, that is something that is unheard of.
There are 300,000 Canadians of Iranian origin, and a lot of them are critics of the regime. And the Iranian government is already clearly showing signs that it wants to bring people in here to shut them up one way or the other.
The Iranian government and the Iranian embassy here was, I would say, fairly busy in trying to infiltrate the Iranian community here, trying to observe what activists were up to, trying to ensure that there was no sort of collective opposition to the Iranian government.
Right now, we are facing a greater danger from the Republic of Iran than we have ever faced before. With the nuclear treaty, all of the frozen assets have been cleaned up, and the Republic has billions of dollars to spend on terrorism, on aggressive intelligence work, and on hunting down and intimidating critics of the country wherever they can be found. And we know that the Iranians will try and shove all manner of people here.
And is the Canadian government going to assure Canadians that Iranian regime is not going to harm them? Is there any assurance? Let's not talk about my own safety. We can talk about the 35 million Canadian safety.
The Trudeau government are misguided in their decision, their promise to reopen the Canadian embassy in Tehran, the Iranian embassy in Ottawa, and to reestablish full diplomatic relations with Iran now is completely misguided. It's wrong. And I'm hoping that the government, as the new ministers and the Prime Minister are briefed by our country's security authorities, will come to realize that this is not the time to reopen the embassy.
Please do not confuse the Islamic Republic of Iran with Daesh. They are one. Please do not confuse people by distinguish the Islamic Republic of Iran from Daesh or ISIS. These are one.
See, you have to understand this, that if today the Islamic State and ISIS are the problem, the godfather of the Islamic State is Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. Without him introducing the notion of the Islamic State, there would never have been the possibility of the calamity that has spread, and for Baghdadi and Bin Laden and all these other small tin-bit players of Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab and even now Al-Qaeda in Bangladesh, all of these can be traced down to that one simple step taken by Ayatollah Khomeini from the Air France plane on the soil of Iran, which he destroyed as a civilization. And it will take centuries to recover of how much damage that one man has created. We just don't need his embassy to be on the soil of Canada.
I'm sure that now, somewhere in Canada, there is an airplane landing, and there are the envoys of the Islamic Republic of Iran arriving and setting their steps into our soil, and they complete their mission, their terrorist activities. Just so simple.
ما جهاده و جهاد ما رو دارن کند میکنن، در داخل به بهانه خشونت و در خارج به بهانه تروریسم. افتخار میکنم که اون تروریست خارج از کشور یعنی حزب الله لبنان اون تربیت شده دست ماست. افتخار میکنم به تروریسمی که بشود بر پایه های کفر لرزه افکن. این خشم و غضبی است که خدا از آستین حزب الله بیرون میاره که سر دشمنش میزنه.